Well, welcome back. Thank you all again for joining us. We really do appreciate your time. We'll try to stick within our 2 hours. I don't think we should have any problem doing that tonight. First thing we wanted to talk about was just a reminder of our process. We had our last meeting, I think it was 3 weeks ago already. It feels like it was a couple days ago. So we got some individual activities back, which was awesome. We went through and compiled your results. Somebody is, I'm going to mute all of you. Sorry, I'm getting feedback. So what we did is we took all of your results, compiled them, and you will see them tonight. We have a virtual feedback meeting right now, and what will come out of this is a final report. So we're getting there. First thing I want to do, just get back to what an ed spec really is. It is written communication from the owner or educator to design professionals, particularly the architect, who we do have here on this call, that is Maurice, describing the current and future educational activities that the school facility should accommodate. So the three biggest parts of this will be the list of foundational space types. That's the compilation of space you all worked on. The models for how these spaces should work together. Again, that's the adjacency models you worked on in that PowerPoint. And then any essential furnishings, fixtures, and equipment, or we often call this FF&E. So if we were to say that and it gets confusing, that is what we're talking about, is just the furnishings and fixtures. So we wanted to just review the activities that you did very briefly. The first one was the compilation of space. You should all be pretty familiar with this document by now, I would hope. I'm not going to go through what we received on this one. This one's very straightforward. The next thing we asked you to do was the program area descriptions. Thank you for all of you who filled these out. I know they're kind of tedious, but they are really important for us. So what we received out of this was the special education and adaptive PE, the classroom teaching station, so the core academics, and then the multi-purpose room. We were able to fill in the blanks for the administration, the cafeteria, and the info and media center. So we're good. We have everything we need. Just wanted to let you know. We also asked you to do the non-programmatic topics. We got a lot of these back, so thank you again for filling these out. The adjacencies, which I kept saying was fun. I think it's fun. I hope you guys enjoyed working on them. For these activities, we received at least one model for each space. So we are in really good shape here. We were able to put together a model for the entire campus that you will see a little bit later. Okay, so here's the compilation of space. We're gonna go through these pretty much program by program, kind of briefly. Some of them differ. The special education aspect really adds some spaces in them. So we have, like in this case, this is the classroom teaching station section. We have with special education and without special education. Very similar. I think the biggest difference is the number of kindergarten and TK classrooms here. Carrie Ann, do you want to go through this?
Yes, I will. And okay. Some of what you see here is kind of new information for you all. When you saw the compilation of space in the draft form that we gave it to you at the last meeting, we gave you just the list of spaces, primarily because two things. One, the quantities of the spaces are in large part determined by a few factors. The grade levels that are ultimately going to be at the building, so whether it's a K-5 or a K-6. It's also the quantities of classrooms are determined by ultimately what kind of growth might occur in the district, and also whether there are any school closures like charter schools or anything like that. So, so the quantities are in large part determined by those factors. The square footage is in large part determined by the compliance with the California standards. So we really wanted to get from you, and what you gave us back was what spaces did you need, what spaces don't you need, and in some cases, some of you did make edits, and you'll see those in the adjacency models to the quantities of those classrooms, and we can talk a little bit about that when we look at the adjacency illustration. But big picture here, what I want you to take away is that in whether it's a school that ultimately has special ed or a typical general ed elementary school, we have computer labs, classrooms, K through 6. We have a STEAM space, which is for primarily delivery of science and art and other activities. When we got the adjacency illustration back, there was a strong suggestion to have multiple spaces throughout the facility and at smaller sizes. That's not really conducive to delivering art and science. So instead of a lot of little small spaces, what we did was we created 2 spaces, one for the primary and one for the intermediate. It was also suggested to have primary and intermediate restrooms for the boys and girls and have those adjacent to the exterior play areas as well. And then some of the stuff on the bottom there is just general spaces that you would need in any facility, whether it's a school or a hospital or a public building, electrical rooms, custodial space, storage space, and automatic fire sprinklers. So can you go to the next slide, Karen? Thank you. So in the special education spaces, and you'll see this again when we look at the adjacency illustration, that we have really 3 different kinds of specialty classrooms: autism classrooms, medically fragile classrooms, full inclusion kindergarten classroom, and then a life skills 4, I should say. In addition to that, we also have just what I would call high incidence special education classrooms. So there's 6 of those. And then all of the adjacent support spaces for each of those: offices, restrooms, or bathrooms. Generally, if you see the word bathroom, that indicates that there would be a shower. Generally, if you see the word restroom, it would indicate a space with a toilet and a sink. In addition to the classrooms and the adjacent support spaces, you also see that there are things like the adaptive PE space, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and then again at the bottom, some of the same spaces that you would see in any other facility. But additionally here, some teacher prep, teacher collaboration space, and so on. And I'll talk a little bit more about the placement of those in the facility when we get to the adjacency model.
I have a question. Do you
Yeah.
just have one bathroom then for the entire site?
No.
I saw restroom, but I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I heard you.
I see what you're saying. One bathroom, one space with a shower. Yes, that's the way I have it delineated here. If that needs to be modified, where else might you see a bathroom in the facility besides here?
Well, we have 2. We have 2 classrooms that I'm aware of that may be in need of a shower other than a toilet and a sink.
So can I chime in here? Where you have that life skills classroom, you have a special education toilet, you need a special education bathroom in there. It needs to have a shower as well.
Okay, I'll make that note that life skills should also have a shower.
Yes.
Is that correct, Elaine? We need 2.
Yes, it is
correct.
Yeah, it is correct. So there are times that there are students in that classroom who have to be washed down.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I apologize for interrupting.
No, I'm glad that you did. That's why I'm going through this. That's an important delineation to have. So thank you for that. Any other thoughts or questions at this point?
I'm going to pop in and ask a question.
Yeah.
Can that be shared, the shower be shared between medically fragile and life skills, or do you need 2 separate physical showers?
You really need 2 separate physical showers. The numbers of kids in there at any given time that may need that facility is not going to be conducive to sharing. And the medically fragile kids are they're probably being lifted and put on, you know, changing tables, that sort of thing. It really doesn't work to share those.
Okay.
And I have a
Thank you.
question for you and some of you other people. Why are we having special education offices? I don't understand the offices as opposed to the teacher prep and lounge area.
Well, I'll chime in for that. The initial thought for that. I'm echoing.
That might be my fault.
Was that associated with each of the special ed classrooms, the teachers needed a space to get away, physically get away from the classroom and have an office. It was something that existed at the existing Richmond, so it was included. If it's something that is not necessary, then we can just provide in the classroom space a teacher's workspace, like a teacher's desk area or something like that.
Well,
So can I give some input on that, Elaine?
sure.
So what I know, the teachers want that for testing, because it's really hard, as you know, to test in the classroom. So they wanted, like they have now, a separate office that they can take a kid into to do testing for IEPs.
But one of the things that I noticed at Richmond was that more often than not, those offices were used for storage and not for testing. So that's why I was asking, you know.
Would it be better, or would it be possible to have, for example, several testing spaces that might be shared by the different classrooms so that they could go to the testing space? Or should it be so tied and so tight to the classroom itself?
Actually, if they're going to use it for testing, it should be tied to the classroom, because that way they are in the vicinity of their class. They can take, I understand what they're saying, and it does make sense if it's going to be used that way. As just saying, and it wasn't always used for that.
So what we should do, instead of calling it an office space, we should call it a testing space.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And you'll
Okay.
see when we look at the illustration, the draft illustration, that would flow really well with what was suggested. And it would be easy enough at this point to convert that to testing space. And then still allow for teacher collaboration space with the general ed teachers and have still a space for that.
So I'm gonna throw out a question that some of us have been talking about. Are we still looking at having our special education classes isolated over in, like what we have our annex now? Many of us ask for those to be moved adjacent to their wing, like a primary wing and intermediate wing.
I'm going to step in here for a second, just because the draft illustration that was suggested, and we then modified it, it shows a full inclusion model. If that's a direction that you all are heading. So we'll be taking a look at that in just a few minutes. So if you could hold that, and if we don't answer your question at that point, then we can come back to it. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. I'm glad that you're asking your questions. That's exactly why we're going through this the way we are. So the slide that's in front of you now are the administrative spaces. The ones that are highlighted are the difference from the building with special ed versus a building without special ed. So we would have a general ed office manager and a special ed office manager at a building with special education, as opposed to just a general office manager. And then the office spaces, we had initially suggested some flexible offices for whoever might need it. And it was suggested instead to delineate out who those offices would be used by. And so we have a speech office, a couple of counselors' offices, and then we have a testing room also at the admin. And now I'm just thinking out loud based on what we just talked about. Maybe that testing room doesn't need to exist at the admin, or maybe it still does because it's nurse and school psychologist versus teacher. Any thoughts about that testing room at the admin level?
Can I speak to that? So the school psychologist often comes and does testing, and so they don't go to classrooms to do that. They often pull students there. So I definitely think we need a minimum of one. The nurse will also come. We also have, which I don't see accounted for, we have not a site counselor, but a school psychologist who visits. And when she visits, there isn't a designated space for her. So I do think we need some flex space because we have lots of people coming providing services. And then in addition, I noticed that the team has one speech space. Is that correct?
Yep.
And we have two. We have two speech and language therapists, and they can't step on each other's toes because there's feedback. One's virtual and one is physical. I don't know how to say that.
On site.
Thank
But,
you.
okay, but
I'm
even
sorry.
next year it may, it's teletherapy. But next year there's the possibility that there will be two on site, but they still can't share a room. They can't do therapy in the same room.
Okay, and that 200 square feet is actually a pretty large space. It could probably be two 100 square foot spaces. Because if you think about it, it's a 10 by 10 room would be 100 square feet. That's a lot of space if it's just a one-on-one kind of thing. So we could probably take the space that's existing both for the testing and the speech language office and make two at 100 versus one at 200. So,
What do you think, Mike? Yeah, Mike Yancey, you are here, right?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yes, it does. Yeah, I agree. Also, some input for the office managers. It's worked out much better having them in the same office. One office larger would be much better than two separate offices.
okay, so the general ed and the special ed office manager together.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's worked out.
I would like to see how you have the site laid out first, Mike.
Okay.
I'd like to see what kind of space.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm gonna pop in. The general ed and special ed office manager, does their space need to be separate from, say, for example, from each other, or they would be in a combined space?
Now, a combined space is fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Going back to the offices and to the speech therapists, in the one condition where we're pretty much looking at Richmond, right? What I thought I heard, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, is that there would be two speech language offices, two counselors' offices, and one testing room.
Actually, I think you could make two testing rooms with that 200 square feet that you're talking about.
Right.
And that, because usually when when they're testing, when the school psychs and the nurses are testing, they're doing it in smaller numbers.
Elaine, what about doing, if you're talking about doing how we have the one speech room at the 200, could we do, and then there's one testing room at 200? The testing room does not need to be large either. Could we do two testing rooms at 100 apiece?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Let's do two. Let's take those these specialty offices where we have 200 square feet. Let's take them and make them all 100 and double the space that we have. Correct.
Because you often will have like assistive technology is testing at the same time that the psychologist might be testing at the same time. So if we're going to provide in special ed classrooms, teachers a testing space, that works for those teachers to test their students, but it doesn't help all the people that come from outside the teacher that test. So
Right.
more of those spaces at Richmond. I know we're always short those spaces.
Yep.
Yeah.
So recapping what I heard was that there are 2 speech, 2 counselors, 2 testing, each at 100 square feet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, the counselor's office, I'm assuming that one of those counselors, I'm getting feedback from somewhere. I'm assuming that one of those counselor's offices is the school counselor, and he probably needs a larger space.
So I think there's the military counselor and the school counselor, and
Okay.
both counselors run either individual or group. So I would say they probably would need the 200.
Okay. Yeah.
I had a question.
Just to know, when you say
Go
when
ahead.
you say a group, how large of a group are you talking about? 12?
Maybe 6 to
6?
8,
6 to 8, including the counselor, or 6 to 8 plus the counselor?
including plus the counselor. Sorry. 6 to 8 students plus 1 adult.
Thank you. Then,
Yeah.
and then the other piece of it, if we're through with that office section at Richmond, on the other side of it, for the standard quote unquote elementary school, are 2 flex offices adequate? Can anyone speak to that?
I'm not sure what you mean by flex offices.
The
Offices that
concept
can be
with,
used by
go ahead,
anybody.
Carrie Ann.
I'm sorry. Offices that can be used by anybody. Counselors, psychologists, speech therapists. They're not like quote unquote owned. Somebody doesn't live in that every day. Folks that can float in and out of those spaces. Sometimes we call that hotel space. People come in for an hour or 2, sit down, work with a student or do some computer work, and then get up and leave. And
We might use that space for translator conferences, but that's 2 to 3 times a year. That's just a suggestion for something you could use in a space like that.
But in a regular school, even without the special ed campus, they're still going to have a speech and language person, a counselor, and need a testing room for the general ed kids. And
Yeah. Well, and as we've all experienced over the years, if we have the space, we'll fill it up.
yeah, of course.
We're always looking for places for people to come in and to be able to take a kid and test them, to be able to do something with them. So I think the more flex we have, the better.
So yeah.
I heard is that,
Go ahead, Marty.
sorry, Carrie Ann, I heard that in that instance, there was at least a need for 3 flex offices for speech, counselor, and testing, instead of the 2 that we have indicated.
No, because if you have 2 speech, if you take over on the special ed side on the yellow, if you make 2 out of that 200, that should be sufficient.
We're talking about the general side now.
Well, but the thing is, the speech services for the general side are special ed services as well. So that's when we talk about we have 2 speech teachers, one of them does the special ed students exclusively, and the other one does mostly the gen ed, but they're still special ed students if they have a speech IEP.
All right, so let's step back for a minute. What we're talking about, the building on the left is a building that contains both general ed and special ed. The table on the right is a whole separate building just talking about general ed. And yes, there may be a little bit of special ed in that building, but these aren't 2 separate tables for the same building.
Right, and what I'm saying is that on the right side, we need the flex offices, but they wouldn't necessarily be a speech office.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And where I was going is what I'm thinking that we need 3.
Yeah.
3 instead of the 2. Okay.
Yeah.
I would say yes.
Yes.
I have something, sorry, I have something to add because I really am looking at this. I'm not the best on space. So if you tell me 250 square feet, I can't really visualize that.
right?
Here's what I can say. So the IEP conference room can hold up to 12 people. We have some IEPs that, right, Elaine, like a big one.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And then in that room, you know, imagine there's a big table and we have to get chairs all around that table. And then we do need some kind of projection system to project IEPs up on the wall. I have no realia to know if 250 square feet is a reasonable size space for 12 people with a huge conference table. And probably we need some built-in storage in there to hold like rights and responsibilities, some kind of cabinet to hold computers and a printer and other things that are pertinent. So I'm not privy. I don't know about the 250 square feet. Is that something that is a reasonable size for 12 people?
So if you imagine that 250 square feet is approximately a space in your house that's 16 by 16. So it might be, you know, the size of a small dining room or a small living room or a, you know, a decent sized dining room or something like that. Since we're all kind of in our homes right now, that kind of gives you a feel for, so like if you imagine a large dining room table, that would be equivalent to like a large conference table. And so, yeah, we're familiar with, you know, large IEP, most IEP conferences are very large these days. Generally that's our standard square footage for those. You know, if you think that 16 by 16 still feels a little crunchy, we might be able to go up to 300 square feet, something like that.
Yeah, I think I'm just guessing, but I think the room we used over at the old Richmond for IEPs would be about 200 square feet.
Okay. So
Mr. Yancey, do you know how big your office is? I mean,
not offhand, but I could measure it.
It might be about that.
Randy, if you think of the conference room that's over here in the Sierra Vista Center, is that about 250?
I don't know if he's with us.
Yes, but there he goes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you figure that's probably about the size room we have. 250 would be 10 by 25, if that helps you imagine it. So you could reshape that in some way. I don't know if that's helpful.
Well, I think to Brandy's point is that, you know, the conference room we have here has a large tables in it, but it can get full really quickly. And so I get what she's saying. If you get everybody and all of the advocates and everybody and mom and dad and grandma and Aunt Susie and everybody who's coming, and that on the parent side, and then everybody that's coming on our sides, it can get pretty full. So it does need to be a fairly large space.
I measured my current office is about 15 by 15.
Okay, so this is just slightly above that. That would be 15 by 15 would be 225, and 16 by 16 is 256. So.
I would make it 300 if it's possible to make it 300.
Mm-hmm. I agree, Pam.
And that, I mean, as big as we can legitimately make it and stay within reasonable standards would be what we would want to do, I think.
I think the space that could be much smaller if it comes to that are those testing rooms, because when I'm looking at the testing room at 200, it's typically one adult with one student, right? So that space is, you know, can be differentiated, but the IEP room is definitely just always seems crowded. I don't know.
Yeah, and we may end up doing that, Brandy. The testing rooms, as we've just discussed, are going to be actually 100 square feet. We just hadn't made that edit here in the moment. So they're going to be 2 at 100 square feet. But even that, we probably don't need 100 square feet for a one-on-one. We might be able to make it 75 square feet or something like that. So we may be able to pull a little bit of square footage from there and add it to the IEP, so it's equals out. So let's take a look at some of the other spaces that are here. All the other spaces on the left-hand table and on the right-hand, go back for a minute. On the left-hand table and the right-hand table are the same. We're going to have a waiting area, a reception space, a workroom, principal's office, spaces for the nurse to exam, a toilet room, a cot room. Oh, do we need a shower in the nurse's office here? No. Okay. And then a staff lounge. Are the words lounge okay with you? A lot of times in districts around the country, I'm getting rid of the word lounge. I know when I was a teacher, I never lounged at school, but is there another word that feels better for you all? Or are you okay with that word? Is it just my thing? Does it matter?
I agree we don't lounge, but it's what we call it, so I'm okay with it.
Okay. Okay, I know it's kind of like, oh, if we call it, teacher lunchroom, well, where's the teacher's lounge? So, okay. And then a teacher workroom, for things like copy machines and, whatever else we might have in there. I don't know if you still use Ellison machines or whatever else. Additional conference space. These are kind of general conference rooms, not for IEP conferences, but, if the principal needs to meet with, parents one-on-one or something like that, outside of their office, maybe a smaller group. And then staff toilets, and then again, some of the same things that you would have in any public building, electrical rooms, custodial, etc. So, I'm sorry, there was something that just popped up in the chat. I want to make sure I address it. Used to have 2 lounge rooms. We have over 80 employees. Do we have a lounge? Can we go back for a minute, Karen, to the special ed spaces? Do we have, yeah, we have a teacher's lounge there for 400 square feet. And then we also have one in the admin now at, what is it, in the, at 960. So, and that's something we can talk through. I don't know if you want still 2 lounges, if you need them to be the same size. I don't know if you want to call one special ed teacher lounge or, do you have any strong feelings or thoughts about, first of all, what they're called?
Well, it would help to see the layout, because if we're mixing in the special ed classrooms with the gen ed classrooms in an inclusive model, then you don't want to have a separate special ed teacher lounge and a special gen ed teacher's lounge.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. I just feel like if we have too many separate areas, I know that we have 80 plus employees, but for me personally, I would like to just get rid of all the singling out, because it really negatively impacts our school. It really does. So as much cohesiveness as we can get would be great.
Okay.
I agree.
All right, cool. All right, so let's look at the next slide. This information or media center is the same, whether it's a special ed magnet building or it's a typical gen ed elementary school. We'll have the center with a circulation desk, a workroom, and some storage. And then again, just some things that you would have in any public building. I have the words student bathrooms here. I need to change that. It should say student restrooms. We're not going to have showers near the media center, so I'll make that edit. But a staff restroom there, and then of course the fire sprinklers.
Is that space the traditional library? I'm having a little, okay. Yeah. Our current, at Old Richmond and at our temporary space, neither space have any student restrooms in the library.
Okay.
I'm not sure we need 4.
Okay.
If you want 4, that's great. I'm just stating what we currently have.
Okay.
So I guess it would be access to student restrooms and access to staff restrooms even, possibly, instead of having separate restroom facilities. Is that what you might be saying?
The previous facility had a staff restroom in the library, the media center. If students needed to use the restroom, they would step outside and use the restroom that was located right near the media center on the playground. In the current Richmond facility, there is one bathroom in the media center. It is also a staff bathroom. And I think it's important because the librarian rarely leaves that space. She can't up and leave. So I do think we need a staff restroom in there, but depending on the placement of the model, I'm not sure that you need student restrooms in the media center, but again, that's just my opinion.
Okay, I hear you. That makes sense. We can look at that when we get to the model and kind of leave that dependent on how that ultimately lays out, but I'll make a note of that. Okay, let's look at the next section. Because we are unsure at this point whether this facility is going to be a K-5 or a K-6, we understand at this point there's not a gymnasium at the elementary grade level. Instead, there's a multi-purpose room. However, if we put the 6th grade at the elementary schools, their physical education curriculum may dictate that they need a gymnasium to deliver the curriculum. So we allowed for that here. Allowed for a gym and storage. We have lockers and showers. Again, that's something that at the middle grades level where the 6th grade is at this point, they have access to, so we wanted to provide that access here. And then we also have a teacher office with a restroom. And then the men's and women's bathroom. Maurice, remind me, the men's and women's bathroom, is that for like a referee or is that for like coaches?
It's a combination of the referees oftentimes will use the coaches' offices, but it's more for viewers and people who are watching whatever event might be going on in there if there is an event.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So again, we provided that in the event that 6th grade does become part of this facility. So, and then the last section, I think it's the last section, is is the cafeteria, one with a warming kitchen and then one with a full prep kitchen, so that we have, excuse me, the space that's, sorry, so that we have not only the cafeteria space, then the appropriate space to prepare a full meal or a space to warm the food if it comes from another prep kitchen somewhere else in the district. So, and again, a lot of these quantities and square footages are determined based on the enrollment of the facility and California state code. In addition to the cafeteria space, you'll see at the bottom that we have a multi-purpose room that also has an adjacent platform, which would be used as the music classroom, and then some spaces to support that, like music storage and AV controls. In addition to that, we have some table and chair storage for the multi-purpose room.
So would that be like a stage when you say platform? It would be like the tradition. And then I'm assuming, I know this is going to sound like a stupid remark, it has wheelchair access to that stage. I'm assuming that's code or something, because we currently, that's a challenge we currently have.
Yeah, yes.
Can I ask what the total number of custodial rooms will be for the facilities? There's one on the bottom of this, but is that the only one if we don't have a gym?
No, there's one in every there's one in every section of the program. So,
Okay.
And the square footage kind of varies based on the amount of square footage within that program. So.
Okay, because typically we have at least 2 custodians at the elementary, so I want to make sure we have at least 2 rooms.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're looking at 4
All right.
in all of these.
Okay, that's good.
I was curious what lockers are used for. Is that for staff? What's that?
That's for the kitchen staff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a requirement. But,
Okay.
you know, especially I would think it'll be interesting to see how this pandemic changes codes for lots of things over time. But, you know, changing clothing and shoes and, you know, that kind of thing. Some folks wear uniforms, aprons, that kind of thing.
Thank you for clarifying. I'm like, I don't know why we need that, but that makes sense.
Yeah, they're always there. We just never see them because they're small and tucked back.
Yeah.
And Brandy, I see your hand is raised. Do you have a question?
It's from earlier that I didn't see anywhere that has, we're talking about counselor space, but in our elementary model, there's actually, the counselor holds classroom lessons that can have 35 students. And because I can't see the other model that we're looking at later, I just kind of had a question about that. And then we also have a projects teacher where there's intervention and collaboration happens in that classroom. And I don't know where that's listed on the list somewhere.
So I can speak to the counselor classroom. Typically when a counselor meets with a group of students, they're meeting with, you know, whatever, Mrs. Smith's 3rd grade class or whatever. And so typically you would want the counselor to go into that classroom and not pull students out, have that classroom sit empty while the counselor teaches in a different space. So to be more efficient with the space, have the counselor come to the classroom versus the students move to a classroom. So we don't account for a separate counselor classroom. Okay. Because they can move into the space and teach those lessons because there's not unique equipment like an art or a science or PE.
Right. The only I hear you. The only issue is that we have a part of our program at Richmond is this rotation of they go to the media center, the library, computer, and counselor. And the only reason I bring it up is if the media center, library, I'm just going to say that, if the library and computer is way over here on campus, okay, but then we're running that library, computer, counselor rotation, and the 1st grade classroom is way over here on campus, you have to imagine as those 3 groups move, it would be most beneficial to have those 3 spaces next to each other. It's the only reason I brought it up because it would be ideal.
Right. Well, and then, so we'll look at that when we look at the space model, but we also need to take into account that when there is movement into the new facility, there will be some operational changes as a result of the new facility. And so maybe the rotation happens differently, or maybe the classrooms are closer to the other spaces that you typically rotate in and out of, you know, that kind of thing. So, but I hear what you're saying. You need to have quick access and flow. And so, so as we look at the adjacency model, we'll keep that in mind. So let's go ahead and bring up that draft adjacency illustration. And what I'm going to say about this is, first of all, it looks like one building. And instead of calling it a building, I'm going to try and use the word campus. Because I know right now you're on a campus with multiple buildings. What I did was I took one of the draft illustrations that was shared with us, which was more of an inclusion model. Somebody had taken the general ed classrooms and moved the special ed spaces into those general education pods. And so, for example, on I'm going to say on the left or the west side of the campus, you'll see those dark green squares. Those are first through third grade classrooms. And so it looks like the suggestion was to have maybe 3 pods, and in each pod to have a general special education classroom as part of that pod. The same was true for the kindergarten. Whoever did that draft had 3 kindergarten classrooms and then included an inclusion kindergarten classroom with the special spaces that they needed, like toilets and office there. So that's the far left or west of the campus. If you look at the far right, there's kind of a mirror image. So there are 2 pods that contain 4th and 5th grade, 3 classrooms each with a special education classroom as part of that pod. And then you'll see the darker green on the far right is a 6th grade pod, again, in case 6th grade becomes part of this campus. So those are kind of the classroom clusters. In addition to those, it was suggested that some of the special ed classrooms kind of maintain their own pod or their cluster. So for example, on the middle left side is the autism spaces. And on the right-hand side are the medically fragile spaces. And just below that are the life skills spaces. The draft that was shared back with us, if you look throughout this campus, you'll see kind of gray offices in the middle of each pod. It was suggested that that be office/STEAM space. And while I like the idea of having STEAM capabilities near each classroom, the size of that space doesn't really allow for the robust art or science that might occur in that. So what I took from that is that we needed more STEAM space in the facility. So I created a secondary STEAM space. So there's a primary one on the left side, right by the media center. And then there's an intermediate one on the right side near the 6th grade and 4th and 5th grade pods. Now, keep in mind, this is not a design. Keep in mind that this is, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So one of the things that we'll do in the final document, and this is not the final illustration, it needs several edits based on the things that you've just told me as we've gone through the compilation space, and then other things that will come up in the course of our conversation. But what I'll do in the final document is not only have an illustration similar to this, but I will narrate every space and talk about why it's important that we have, for example, a life skills space, and why it's important, why the location of that life skills space is important, for example. I have a couple of questions that popped up for me as I was drafting the illustration based on the drafts that I got back. My main questions become things like, I see that in this illustration, adaptive PE was at the far left or west. The multi-purpose room was right in the center of the campus, and then the cafeteria was on the far right. Now, given our experience with doing the ed specs around the country, I would typically want the adaptive PE, the multi-purpose room, and the cafeteria all to be adjacent to each other. So for example, if I'm doing a presentation or a program in the multi-purpose room where the stage is, I can have additional overflow seating that might go into either the cafeteria or the adaptive PE. So I'm curious if that piece, what I just shared, wasn't necessarily a consideration, or if there in fact is a reason that those 3 spaces need to be separated in the way they are.
So I can speak to that. I didn't really think about all of that sort of thing, but I was more or less thinking about, okay, so if we have, say, our Christmas program happening, and we also have lunches happening around the same time, I wanted those to be separate enough to where you wouldn't hear kids eating lunch while you're having some performance or a assembly of some sort. And then the adaptive PE was similar, because I know oftentimes the adaptive PE, that will be our SPED kiddos working with our therapists in that space. And so I didn't really want, if they needed it to be a quiet environment or, you know, just whatever it was, I didn't know if sound would be an issue. So that's kind of why I did some of
That's
that.
a good consideration.
Can I speak to the adaptive PE just looking at this?
Absolutely.
It needs to be closer to the medically fragile and the life skills classes. The autism, because those are the kids that use that most, and they are no special equipment. And if you had to go from that part of the campus all the way down to the end with the equipment, that's difficult. It needs to be closer.
Okay. Well, and that was my, okay, so life skills. So that brings up another question for me. I also see that OTPT are next to the multi-purpose room. So talk to me a little bit about the relationship among medically fragile, adaptive PE, OTPT, and life skills.
Okay, so there is adaptive PE, OT, and PT are very much intertwined, and a lot of times those three service providers are working with the medically fragile or the life skills kids, and sometimes our kids on the spectrum, but they're working in the classrooms with them. The OT does some pull out, but not much. Most of the services are done in the classroom with the students. And so they're going in and out. So they do need to be located close to those, especially the medically fragile and the life skills classes.
So let me ask you this. What if we took the medically fragile, the OTPT, and the life skills and kind of chunked that piece out and moved it down to the end where adaptive PE is? Because to me, having that kind of, those functions right in the center of the campus, I don't know, that might be okay, as I'm thinking out loud. Do you have a strong sense of, from a campus perspective, where those should be? Should they be in the center of the campus? Should it be at one end or the other end of the campus? Any thoughts about that?
I don't know. Go ahead, Brandy.
So the super exciting part about designing a new school is really that full inclusion model. And so I can speak to my counterpart who has one of the life skills classes that that class is going to need to be near 4th and 5th grade. So I think maybe the better idea is to take this adaptive PE at the end and then move it next to this black box where you have the SPED teacher collab space. If you could move that adaptive PE to that space back there instead of moving our life skills classes, because then I like them at the heart of the school where they're not on the outskirts, but again, that's my opinion.
No, and I agree with that. I agree.
Okay, I'm going to actually do some of this in the moment while we're talking, because you're not going to be able to see what I'm doing. I'm just going to move it for myself so that I remember later.
And can I ask you a question real quickly? Just looking at this, and I realize that this is just an illustration, but it looks as if that life skill class is divided, where you have the offices and the SPED.
There are two. It was indicated that we needed an intermediate and a primary life skills class.
No. The life skills class is. Oh well, wait a minute. No, that's we okay. Was somebody thinking about Aaron's? Not Aaron Zobel's anymore, but Dee Dee Loudon's class. It's not a total life skills class. I mean, to me, the current life skills class that we have at Richmond needs a large space.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this, by dividing it like this, no, it's not going to work.
Okay, well, it's not one room that's divided. It's 2 whole rooms. So.
All right, is that Tom's room and then Miss Miller's room? Is
No,
that the two?
the Miller's room is the medically fragile room,
Where is that on here?
right up above the medically fragile.
Right there.
Oh, duh. Okay, I'm trying to read. My eyes are
I
getting
know
hurt,
it's a
but-
lot to take in. It's a lot here. So
No, what I think what has happened is because we have another classroom that's currently, we call it, it's not, but it's not really a life skills class. She has some students in there that are primary kids who may feed into Tom's room, but she's not going to do a full life skills curriculum with them. And so this room right here needs to be one large room for the current program that we have.
okay, so you just need one life skills room.
Yes.
Yes. Large.
So
Yes.
Elaine, I was
Loudon's room on
picturing,
here.
I was
That's what I
picturing
wanted.
Loudon's room being in that cluster of the autism.
Me too. That's where I thought, but that's the only thing when she's saying that somebody indicated that they needed 2 life skills class, we don't.
Yep.
Okay. Let's talk for a minute about these black spaces that right now are behind SPED OT. I don't intend to have those spaces there at all. I placed them there because when I got the draft illustration back, those were spaces that somebody said, we don't need any of these. And I don't think that's what they meant. I think what they really meant was, can you combine these spaces with the general ed spaces? I don't think people were saying we don't want conference space or collaboration space or a teacher lounge or storage. I think what people were trying to communicate to us is that we just want to take these spaces, this square footage, and add it to the general. Is that correct?
So I know that I may be the one, I don't really know why SPED teachers would need their own collaboration space and conference area. Again, I don't teach SPED, so correct me if I'm wrong. I just didn't know why we needed those extra spaces when we as an entire staff can use like one teacher collaboration area, which in my case would be my classroom. That's where we collaborate. And then same with all the little SPED conference rooms. I didn't really think we needed those, but again, correct me if I'm wrong.
Stephanie, are you still with us?
And you give her a minute to unmute.
Yes, sorry.
That's okay. What do you, Stephanie, what do you think about that? Because there are times when the SPED teachers do collaborate, especially when we're meeting to talk about moving kids up or what. So what do you think about that?
And oftentimes when the gen ed teachers are collaborating,
Oh. Did she bug out or is it just me? Can anybody?
No, I think there's a connection issue. Give her a second.
Okay. Yeah, because she's frozen now.
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie, come back.
I think Stephanie, if it won't work, maybe try typing because we can at least see what you type.
Mm-hmm.
All Zoom calls finally turn into a bad Saturday Night Live skit, right? So, can I ask a couple questions until she gets back?
Sure.
Okay. So, what is the thought about the STEAM labs? Initially, when the program was shared with you, we shared one STEAM lab. When this draft came back, all these little gray offices actually were little white boxes that said office/STEAM room. And that doesn't really work to do lots of little STEAM, art and science in those smaller spaces. So I created an intermediate STEAM and a primary STEAM lab so that we would have space for art and science. What's the thought behind STEAM spaces? Any thoughts?
I have to turn that one over to Brandy and to to the gen ed side.
I think esteem. Oh, go ahead, Bree.
Go ahead.
I think esteem space is super exciting. I think instead of a bunch of smaller spaces, if we could get a primary space and an intermediate space, because our new science curriculum is heavy-handed on experiments, and so teachers could sign up to set labs up ahead of time. So I think 2 larger spaces is a much better idea than a bunch of smaller ones, but again, that's me.
Okay.
That's what this has. It has a primary STEAM lab and an intermediate. I think that's a great idea.
So
Stephanie's back.
Oh,
Sorry, you guys. I'm trying to switch over to a different Wi-Fi network. Mine keeps going out.
Well, thank you for coming back. So I forget what we had asked you. And what
Okay, so we're talking about the special ed teachers collaboration space, because there are times when the SPED teachers do meet
Yes.
separately.
Yes, correct. And a lot of times, like after a staff meeting, when we break into collaboration, we're collaborating separately from the gen ed teachers. So yeah, it might be nice to have a separate one.
Okay.
would you need an
and-
actual separate facility, or do you guys usually collaborate in someone's classroom right now?
Yeah, see, we can do a classroom. I mean, the kids aren't there at that time, so
Okay. All right. Well,
yeah, that would be fun.
okay. We can, since we have the square footage, I'd rather hang on to it rather than saying, let's get rid of it. If we decide we need it somewhere else, we can do that. But for now, I'm going to say, let's hold on to it. And maybe just put it in would you want it in one of the classroom cluster pods, or would you want it near an administration area or central in the campus? Any thoughts about that? About its
Probably near one of the classroom pod. I guess it really doesn't matter, honestly. It really doesn't matter.
Okay.
I don't think it matters, but I know Kim Kennedy just put up what I was thinking too, that we do have to have a resource specialist room.
Okay.
I didn't even notice that it wasn't included. Absolutely, we have to have one.
Well, it's down here in this
it is.
black at the bottom.
It's there.
Oh.
It's at the bottom. And like I said, in one of the drafts I got back, it was indicated that maybe we didn't need it. So
Oh, no.
I was
Oh,
thinking,
no. That's an essential SPED function.
right. I thought so. That's why I hung on to it. So
I'm not sure down here in the bottom at the black, all these special ed conference rooms. Now those, I'm not sure what those, I don't think we need those. Anybody else?
Yeah, I don't think we do.
Yeah,
I think those were there because we were this model was that there wasn't necessary to have a testing room in every classroom, and so possibly that's why there were testing rooms around there. And then just to speak about that SPED teacher collaboration space, and I am speaking from a gen ed perspective, but the gen ed teachers, we join in a classroom before school to have collaboration, just like our special ed teachers would join in a classroom to have collaboration. And then if we had to have a group collaboration, that's what the projects teachers classroom intervention, that's why we need a classroom. So I don't know where that is on here, Ms. Albrecht, and
I don't know
Karen,
either.
I'm not sure. But we need an actual classroom for intervention and collaboration, and that can be used for a multitude of things.
I'm curious, the Information Media Center, is that the library and the computer lab?
no, the computer lab is adjacent to that. You'll see the blue square to its left.
Oh, sure, thank you.
Like,
where's
but,
it?
I just don't see the intervention collaboration room.
No,
Yeah.
we don't have that space. Tell me more about that space. I'm not sure what tell me more about it.
That's our projects teacher's classroom. And when she's not teaching intervention groups, that's where teachers get together and do our collaboration. By
So
grade level.
where you have the Information Media Center, I could speak to it because I helped with this one, all right. But anyways, I had those 4 classrooms together, or 4 areas together. I had the computer, like a classroom, the library, the counselor, and the projects office was going to be a pod. Just like you have there, the 4 classrooms, I had that there. And then I also want to speak to that STEAM space, those gray areas. So the idea I had for the layout of the school was literally my elementary school growing up, which was in Rancho Cucamonga, Stork Elementary. So just to kind of, I don't know if you guys have been there or heard of that place, but what it was they were pods with 4 classrooms on the outside, and literally there was an entire classroom on the inside. So when I put in their STEAM space, my idea was to have an extra classroom in the middle there. It was the size of a classroom, and you could then have grade level, like if you rotated and did fun activities with STEAM, you would have that area. And so that's why I put it there. I know the offices, I didn't want to adjust the sizes for you guys.
Cool. So Brianna, what you're saying is that you wanted, sorry, I'm getting some feedback here. What I think you're saying is that you almost wanted like a, what we might call an extended learning area, so that you could bring students from more than one classroom or a few students from each classroom and kind of have a space where you could kind of break out into that could be used as an office when necessary, but also have some breakout space.
Office or storage. And we had it to where too, like, so my elementary school was very big. So we had 5 classes per grade level. So that middle classroom was actually a classroom, but I was also thinking that too, like if for some reason we needed a combination class, we would have a separate classroom to be able to push that into if need be.
Yeah, I like that idea. We generally plan buildings with an extended learning area as part of it. I don't know from a square footage perspective, because obviously these offices would be much smaller than a classroom size or an extended learning area size. But of course, if we push these pods together, right, then maybe we could get some of that extended learning area effect in some way, rather than, 4 spaces using one, maybe it's 8 spaces using one and it's a little bigger or something. So maybe we can play with that a little bit to incorporate your idea of office space and extended learning area space.
And then also speaking, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we're missing that classroom for collaboration, intervention. That space is missing on the model.
So we would need a projects office, and then,
So,
and then the RSP room.
Not office, I think we need to clarify classroom.
You're right, sorry, projects classroom.
So
intervention classroom.
So when you say project or intervention classroom, I'm not clear what that is and why that function couldn't happen in a typical classroom. So explain it to me more.
It is a typical classroom. We just need a space. I don't see a space for it unless we took like one of the classrooms and created one.
So what do you do in that space?
So I hold interventions. I have either small group interventions, or I can also hold the enrichment groups, which could be up to 20 or 30 kids, depending on how many, how large that is. That's why it would be nice to have a large classroom. And then I also hold teacher collaborations every afternoon in there.
So is this like, I might be using old terminology, so forgive me. So is this like resource classroom in days of yore?
No, this is a whole new position.
A title, I would consider it more of being a full-time Title I classroom teacher. So a Title I teacher. But typically in the past, intervention would only have in best practice, a max of 6 kids. But the model that I was talking about earlier, where our kids rotate from library to computers to counselor, during that hour-and-a-half block, our teachers are collaborating, deciding what we need our kids to learn, you know, who doesn't know it, what we're going to do with them. And so those spaces need to be in the heart of the school and all centrally located for flow.
Okay. Would one of you be
the meat and potatoes of our program at Richmond and actually all of our elementary schools in our district?
Is there some narrative or something that one of you could email us on that, so we, when we write about this space, we'll be clear on, because each space will have its own little narrative, there's program area descriptions, and I just want to make sure that we are communicating appropriately what this space is and what it's used for.
Yes, I can do that. Who do you want me to email to? Do you want me to email Karen?
Yeah, that'd be good. Thank you. Thank you.
And then the RSP room, we also need that. That would just be a smaller office, or do you guys think she needs, that person would need a classroom?
I don't think that the way she conducts her program now and the way it's been conducted in the past, I don't think she needs a full classroom.
Okay.
She needs enough to be able to have small groups in there, maybe groups of 6 up to 6 or 7, but I don't think she needs an entire classroom.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
She's been running OG groups in there, so and then there's 2 just for body space. There's 2 grown-ups in that space as well.
Right, and each grown-up may have their own group, so it needs to be not a full-size classroom, but it needs to be a big space.
Yeah.
Probably needs to be large enough for two large tables, and then like 2 teacher workspaces. Yes. Would be my suggestion.
So like 400 square feet.
That is that how many square feet is a typical classroom?
960. So I'm
yeah, 400. Yeah, that should do it.
Yeah, that'd probably be perfect. I think she's in a smaller space than that right now.
Yeah,
she'd probably love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you this then. Right now, the way that this campus is laid out, the information, or the library media center, is right next to the multi-purpose room. Now, this isn't like one building where they're necessarily going to be sharing a wall. So is that an okay adjacency, or do we want to move that to somewhere else in the facility? Or in the campus, sorry.
Well, I personally think it's good, because it's, if we're using it for any rotation or any of our intervention groups, they could use that, and then it's close to the library and the computer lab.
Okay.
And it's also close to the office.
I don't see the computer lab. I see the media center, but I don't see where the computer lab is.
Blue. Left in blue.
Oh, it's just not to scale, correct?
It's scale-ish.
Okay, can I had sent an email to, I think to Karen, I had sent an email about the computer lab, because on the document about, that you guys sent out, the 5-page document that we were privy to before this, there was a statement in there that that space would hold 30 chairs, but I don't, somewhere in there. And I had sent an email back that that space often can hold up to 40 students at a time, because we have our class size is 32. Sometimes our district puts us over that. And then we mainstream during that time as well. So I might get 6 kids from my life skills class on top of the 33 I have, plus 3 para educators and a teacher. And so it's really important that that space hold 40 students with 40 workstations. I don't know where to say that, but I'm doing it now.
Yeah, so yeah, that's good. Thank you. You said it. We got it. Those, you probably put that in the program area descriptions for that space, would be my guess. So I haven't.
Yeah, I got an email of it with it too.
Okay, good. So, and then I wanted to ask a question too. The cafeteria on that far right side or east side of the campus with the outdoor eating area? Does that feel like that's probably the right location for that space? Or would you prefer, because what I've done now is I've taken in my draft here, moved the adaptive PE closer into the life skills space and near the medically fragile. Yeah, at this point, I haven't really done a lot of other edits. I will on some of those black sped spaces at the bottom there.
So personally, and this is just me being selfish because I'm a kindergarten teacher, for having kindergarten and primary students have to walk from one end of the campus all the way to the other to get to the cafeteria is not fun. We've done it for years, and it's not easy, and it's a little bit of chaos.
Yeah, you're right. It should probably be on the primary side of the building.
I wonder, could we just flip-flop the cafeteria, kitchen, and outdoor area and the adaptive PE?
Yeah. Yeah, we can make some kind of swap out there.
Okay, so I have another question here. I'm looking at the multi-purpose room, and I'm not sure. Is that sort of the place taking the place of the big room in the annex where you're going to have assemblies and that sort of thing?
Yes.
I think so, Ling.
Okay, well, you've got the speech, you got the speech services right next to it. And that's not going to work if there's an assembly in there and they're trying to do speech. Depends, I mean, unless the walls are really soundproof.
Is there going to be like a breezeway, or is there, thick walls, I guess?
So do all the grade levels use the speech services, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we still want that to be somewhere centrally located, maybe on the other side of the library, something like that.
That might be better. I mean, because, there's the potential for during a superstars assembly, there's a potential for the noise level to interfere with speech.
Of course. Yeah. Okay. So last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about some of these outdoor spaces and pick up and drop offs. So let me just tell you the edits that I'm anticipating making, and then we can talk about where the pick up and drop offs are. So what I heard was, in general, move the cafeteria over to where adaptive PE is, move adaptive PE closer to medically fragile, life skills, etc. Move the speech services and testing room to the left side of the information or the information media center. And yeah, I'm going to look at how I can cluster these classrooms together differently so that office space becomes more of an extended learning area. And then because of that, then we may want to modify some of these pick up and drop off things. So currently, on the right-hand side where the cafeteria is, and it's going to be moved, I had the general education pick up and drop off. And on the other end of the building where adaptive PE had been, I had special education pick up and drop off. For the buses. Is that correct? Yeah, that's where I had that.
I see 2 special ed, is that correct? Where medically fragile is, there's a special ed bus drop off pickup. And then there's also one over by adaptive PE.
Oh, you know what? I should have deleted the one by adaptive PE. That's my my fault. I should have deleted that one. We should have it just by medically fragile, not by adaptive PE. So I'll take that one away. And then we have a parent pick up and drop off at the front of the facility. So again, I just kind of took my best guess at what made sense on this campus, but maybe talk to me a little bit about what you think is a more appropriate placement for buses for general ed, special ed, and parent.
So the way that old Richmond was, oh, go ahead, Brandy.
No, my question is where the playground is, so I can refer to this cafeteria, because it looks like we're moving. It sounds to me like the cafeteria is being moved down to where adaptive PE, and adaptive PE is moving closer to life skills. But I do have a concern about the cafeteria, because I don't know where the playground is in relation to any of this, but if we move the cafeteria just by kindergarten, that means that's good for kinder, and I'm not trying to knock Kim and the kinder, but that means 1st through 5th grade, depending on where you put the playground. If it's way down over by the cafeteria where we currently have it, that's going to be a lot of supervision issues as they transition from cafeteria to their lunch recess. So I just was trying to get a perspective on where those spaces are planning on being.
Right now, they're in the upper left-hand corner. We have 3 different kinds of spaces. We have turf, hard court, and playground for 1st through 3rd, kindergarten, and then we also have it for the 4th and 5th grade. So
it would work having the cafeteria there, except for 4th and 5th there, and they're older, so they can transition over. That sounds great.
Okay, and the scale on that is not right now, but we will adjust that. So, and so, okay, so we know where the outdoor play spaces are. You kind of see where the pickup and drop-offs are. And last but not least, at the front of the facility, or the campus, excuse me, where the administration is, I put community and event parking and visitor parking. And then I had staff parking where the cafeteria was. But now that we're talking through this, does that still feel okay? Should I move staff parking over to where near the cafeteria? What's your thoughts about where parking should be? Anyone?
I don't know. We need a lot of staff parking.
Yeah, we got the numbers, so we can size it appropriately.
Could we split it in half and put
Probably.
one on each end of the campus?
I hear what you're saying. Yep, probably. I mean, it's easy enough to. I can do it right now and see how much I can quickly build and construct right here on my screen. So, yep, done.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to split them up, to split the staff up at opposite sides, but away from the parent event parking.
Gotcha.
And I was going to say too, as far as said drop-off pickup, you may want to put them over to where the adaptive PE or the new cafeteria will be. It's just nice having those completely separate areas for drop-off and pickup because of timing issues along with special needs, wheelchair access and whatnot. I know it takes a bit longer for special ed buses to drop off pickup. So like at Old Richmond, we had 2 completely separate areas and it worked very nicely.
Okay.
But again, Bree, let me remind you that those medically fragile kids are all usually in wheelchairs and equipment. And if you have to take them from where they're located now to the end where the adaptive PE is now, that's a lot of it. At the Old Richmond, they were able to go right outside their door.
Yeah, you're right. Could we swap that then? Have sped where like you have it in medically fragile around that area and then put regular ed over by the new cafeteria?
So what I'm envisioning when I edit this illustration is having, right now we almost have like, 12 little clusters right now. We have, 4 pods on this left side with classrooms and 3 on this right side. And so what I'm envisioning more is like having a facility that's medically fragile, life skills, adaptive PE, and that would have the special ed drop off, right? And then the cafeteria would be a facility with the general ed drop off. And then we would have the classroom cluster facilities, and then the central facilities and admin, and then probably the library, computer lab, STEAM, and then multi-purpose. So, so I'm envisioning that ultimately this will look, the concepts will be the same, but it'll visually appear different. Right now it's very separate and linear, and I'm envisioning that it will probably end up being bigger chunks, the classroom, core spaces, multipurpose room, admin, and media, special needs spaces, medically fragile, adaptive, and then the core classrooms on the right-hand side. So I think I can accomplish what you're asking, which is to make sure that that drop-off is available through adaptive PE directly into medically fragile and the other special ed spaces in that building. So I think we have our marching orders on that for sure. So we're modifying our presentation a little more than we had intended to, but we're still within our time guidelines here. Karen, can you go on to the next slide?
Yeah, so what we were gonna do before we had that discussion, which pretty much accomplished exactly what we needed, was we are gonna split up into small groups and review the compilation of space and discuss the adjacency models, or model, there's only one. So just to that note, because we kind of did that as a group, there's not a ton of us, so it really worked out pretty well.
Right.
Does anybody have any other comments about either of those? And I'm happy to go through them again. Maybe what if I went through them one more time and we can look and really make sure that we capture anything that you have to say?
So I just posted a question. Can you tell me the square footage of my inclusion room, my inclusion kindergarten room? I'm just curious. Because what we have now at where we are right now barely works. It's really not good.
It's 1,250 square feet.
Mike, how big is my room now?
But hold on, that's just the classroom. In addition to that, you have an office, a teacher restroom, and a student restroom. So,
Well, can I jump in there? You're in a 4-wide relo right now, so you're just a little under 1,800 square feet.
Okay.
Ooh.
Yeah. We take up a lot of room.
Yeah, actually 960. So yeah, you're almost 1,900 square feet right now.
but
This space, all of those spaces all together are like 1,830 square feet.
Yeah.
Right?
And there'll be more efficiency in a new facility. Although I can't say that definitively, I've not seen your current space, so. But sounds like it's comparable from just a square footage standpoint.
That means that Tom's room is going to be very small too, because isn't he also in a triple?
He's in a 4-wide also.
So, and his new space is only going to be 960. Oh, but that's not including his kitchen or office. Okay.
And the toilet, yeah, and all that other stuff, yeah.
So this is Pam. Where are these square feet coming from? Are we trying to keep ourselves to a comparable square footage with some amount of increase in capacity? Or are these standards that come from somewhere else?
I know, Maurice, when we first put this first draft together, they were all based on the California requirements, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So
the source for these for like standard classrooms and other classrooms is based on the California Department of Education for their for standard uses. The other ones are based on what it is that seems to make sense for the uses that are there. The full inclusion kindergarten classroom, as an example, I think probably maybe a little bit shy. As I think it's Kim, right?
Yeah.
That in terms of its space. So I think we might want to revisit that a little revisit that based on what it is. Did you give some program area description information as to what needs to be in the space, et cetera, et cetera?
I think I did. It's just my numbers. We have up to 30, we've had up to 36, actually 38 students at one time, but usually we're between 30 and 36. And we have 2 teachers and 1, 2, 3, 4. Do we have 4 paras right now, Elaine?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, yes,
Yeah.
and 4 paras. So we have 6 adults and up to 36 kids in that classroom.
And sometimes you have students who have like a walker, like another device too, do you not?
Yes, at times I do. I've had kids in walkers, wheelchairs. I've had it all.
Okay. Yeah, like Marie said, we will take a look at that and look at all the different things that you included in the program area descriptions. It sounds like we probably need to bump up that square footage some.
Okay, and I'm going to throw something else as we're looking at this. We did take into consideration in those medically fragile classroom and the life skills that they have to have washer and dryers and dishwashers, right?
Yes, that will all be part. That's what we're not showing tonight because it takes so much time are those program area descriptions that you all filled out.
Okay.
Mechanical, plumbing, electrical, lighting, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Yes, we will.
Yeah, I don't even want to get into that technicality. I just want to know that it's going to be there for us.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking.
Okay.
Can I bring up?
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I want to bring up a couple of the nuts and bolts things as we build these buildings. I really appreciate what I'm hearing. It's very helpful. It's just a couple things. We're anticipating modular construction. So the blocks, really bring it to life for me. Not that modular is always a block, but just from the type of construction we're anticipating. And currently, we're generous measurements. We're at 52,600 square feet on the old Richmond site. And because this is a DoD OEA funded project, I'm fairly comfortable that we can get 10% more. We can prove to them we need that space. I'm not sure we can do much more than that as we bring our proposal to the OEA. But you're talking if we do that, we're talking an additional 5 classrooms. So I don't see how we can go over that. So we might be looking at 4 additional classrooms and additional restrooms. So, but I think as we use our space more efficiently too, we can probably hit that mark. But there's an unlimited piece of property, but not an unlimited amount of space that we can just build out. So, I'm the guy that has to say those things. And then the other thing that I have seen other models of schools, and I thought we might want to build this way. The way the offices, the little offices sat in all the pods, that's like 100 square foot office just for the teachers in that pod. And that's very easy to accomplish with modular construction. You take 25 feet out of each classroom. You have your teaching walls, your cabinets up against that, so you really don't miss it. But is that something that staff wants? Because I thought it was a great model in the schools I looked at, but I don't teach. So, that's a question whether we want to, every place we build a pod, do we want a very small office that just gives the teacher a place to go get away from all the commotion? There'd be a window to look back inside your classroom and, just a built-in desk type of arrangement, place to sit and just get away from things.
One place to make a private phone call, for example.
Yeah.
If we did that one office for like 4 classrooms, then each special ed classroom wouldn't need their own office. If they have to test, they could step in there and test, and they still could have a desk in their classroom like a gen ed teacher has. And then instead of having 4 separate little offices, teachers are in their classroom teaching, and then when that office space is needed, then it seems to me like one office space shared between them for the testing purpose would be more space efficient.
I think that would work, Brandy. It would just be a scheduling thing. you know, if someone's using that space for a small group activity, then obviously you can't do your testing in there, but we're usually pretty flexible with that special ed testing.
Well, and it sounds like we have plenty of other office spaces on campus to where you could always, if there was an activity and you had like a random, you have to run some certain assessment by a certain time, could you not pull out and go to that other space?
Here's where I'm going to say that's illegal because you can't.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm sitting here thinking, no, you're not going to take the teacher out of the classroom to go test.
So I'm glad you say that though, because we have a lot of issues with that on our campus. So yeah, I'm not gonna get into that, but it's, I just say that because that's how I envision things happening. So I'm glad that you clarified that. Thank you.
That is my pet peeve, and that is what I'm constantly telling other teachers. You cannot leave your classroom without a certificated teacher.
And I won't even bring it up at this point because, but I am going to say it. They're not supposed to be testing during class time anyway.
Thank you for that too.
But there's also the possibility of having adjacent space to a classroom with, you know, glass walls for visual supervision into that space. So when I redraw this with those extended learning areas, in the space descriptions, we'll put that those have glass walls so that if I'm in that space, you can see into the other spaces, you know, so that you do get an extended learning area. You're extending the learning beyond your classroom. So nonetheless. So Karen, I'm going to switch up the agenda on you real quick. Initially, we had said that we wanted you all to help us narrate or define these program area narratives. And I think based on the conversation that we've had this evening, Karen and I can whip those into shape and send them out to somebody at the district to finalize if we need gaps filled in. So,
if you feel especially passionate about those, feel free to edit like whatever area you are a part of and send it to me. That would be helpful. So if you don't trust us to do it, please feel free to just do it for us and send it over. That would not bother me in the slightest.
So just in case you're not crystal clear on what we're talking about, the last 3 or 4 pages of the agenda, we had created a draft narrative to describe each program area. And some of them are real high level, some of them are nitty gritty, and some are in between, and some of the paragraphs maybe don't apply to your school or your district. But based on what we've talked about tonight, I feel like I could go back and rewrite those to make them speak to your program. But if you want to read through it and write something, I would ask that you get that to us by the end of the day on Friday of this week. So.
And I've already received, I think 2 people have reached out to me with edits to those already. So thank you for doing that. We do already have a starting spot for that. So
then the last thing I'd like to do tonight, well, I'll end with questions and answers, but the very last thing I'd like to do is that we ask you to consider a question. So sometimes I like to ask this question in lots of different ways. The one that's on your screen now says, if you could tell the architect one thing about the new campus or the new facility, what would it be? And sometimes I like to think about it 5 years from now, whenever it is, maybe 2 years, I don't know. You walk onto the new campus and you say, yes, they did it right because fill in the blank. Or you can do the reverse of that. Like, oh no, I can't believe they did X, Y, Z because we still have or don't have whatever.
Randy, I saw that you just raised your hand. Do you have a question?
The only other comment I was going to make, and I don't know if this has been communicated for Maurice, is when we started looking at this piece of property to put the school on, we thought we would bring traffic across from 2 streets, and all traffic will be coming off of Richmond Road. So as we lay this down on there, all traffic will be coming off of a road to the east side of the campus. And I know I told other people we were going to build a road between Gateway and Richmond. So I just want everyone involved with this to have a picture in their mind that the city is going to require us to have all traffic flow off of Richmond Road. And in my mind, it kind of changes the shape of things a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't know how to raise my hand, so I just am speaking.
Okay,
That's okay.
Okay, so I've been waiting for this one, because if I could tell the architect one thing, it's that we need to keep the safety of our kids in mind. One of the things that we're finding, I think we're finding difficult at our current facility, that because we don't have what we had at the old school, is safe places. In our autism classrooms, we've got runners, we've got kids that run, and we don't. At the old facility, they had walled-in patios. They had a space where they could go out, they could get some energy off, and they were safe. So one of the things I think that I would like for them to pay a whole lot of attention to keeping all of our kids safe.
great, thank you. And there will be a whole section in the final document on safety and security. Some of you did respond to those initial questions that we sent out last time, so we'll include those concepts. But yes, we'll include that. So thank you. Who's next?
I can go next. I totally agree with Elaine on that. I want them to know that, you know, we want that inclusion. We want our special ed classes closer to our gen ed classes, but yet our special ed classes do have some special requirements. My class, I got to tell you, I've missed that enclosed patio more than anything this year, because when I have a child that is going into complete meltdown and I have to take them and stand outside the door with them, it's terrifying to think they could take off running. And I had one take off and go to the fence and start climbing the fence. So just having the facility fenced for our special ed students really isn't enough.
Okay. Thank you. Who else?
I'll go. Yeah, besides after safety, my feeling would be a full inclusion configuration where we can integrate our special ed classrooms throughout the campus.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, mine was very similar to his, just kind of getting those classes, the special ed classes, closer to the general ed classes that they would be partnering with. So it looks like that's going to be able to happen. So that's great.
Good. Good.
And that would be mine as well. You shouldn't be able to walk on campus and the old campus is, oh, that's the annex. That's where our special ed facilities are. And that's where we had 2 separate staff rooms. And so people should be able to walk on campus and not really tell where, you know, what type of classroom by walking through. It should all be integrated together, because that it really is what makes Richmond amazing, is that collaboration model and full inclusion.
So I'm hearing themes so far: safety and security, full inclusion. What about anything regarding the unique programs? Anything around arts or STEAM or library media? Anything that you want to ensure that, you know, because you have this new campus, you're going to be able to do different or new kinds of programs? Is there anything that you're envisioning you want to be able to do in this new campus that you can't do now?
I think that's exactly what they've been talking about, is to be able to do the full inclusion model with a physical facility that lends itself to that, because that is the unique program at Richmond.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
It's that comment that I feel like I'm having a hard time articulating, that this meat and potato, this library, computer, counselor, intervention, collaboration, those 4 spaces, they really, all classrooms, all teachers, all students use that space, and our interventions and our enrichment and mainstreaming, that needs to be kind of a cohesive unit in a good location where all students and teachers can access that, because it really is important to all of our students.
So that almost becomes like a hub of the facility, and we have like hub and spoke. where that could be the hub, and then the spokes could almost be like these clusters of classrooms that surround that.
And when we talked about, I hear you that counselor goes into the classroom, that's how we've been currently doing it. But that comment that I'm like, when you have 120 kids transitioning into this like trionymo, right? Library, computer, counselor, when they have to traverse the campus way over to this side to get to their original classroom for their whole group 30 student counseling lesson, we lose a lot in transition time. There's supervision issues as kids are running, you know, let's hope not, from that space to the next. And so, you know, number one would be that full inclusion model where we're all integrated, but then that library, computer, counselor, and intervention collaboration space, they really do need to be centrally located and located near each other, in my opinion.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. And so if I think back, if I take that comment and then kind of extrapolate it back to the illustration that we were discussing for a while, I'm envisioning that like the hub is those pieces that you just talked about, the library, the computer, the counselor. And then in addition to that hub would be kind of the multi-purpose room and another piece of that, and then those medically fragile, adaptive PE, life skills. So maybe 3 chunks in the middle, and then the spokes would become those kind of classroom spokes around kind of the outside of those 3. Does that make sense? Maybe it'll make sense once I draw it again and show it to you. So, but I think I'm getting a flavor of what you're talking about.
If I'm hearing correctly, yes.
Okay.
But just making sure maybe that it's a 4, it's the computer, library, counselor, and that projects classroom, projects Title I classroom.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay.
And I agree with what everyone was saying, because that's what I was really, the inclusion is really what my main focus was, just to really feel together, because we do oftentimes feel split apart from each other.
Good.
I really wanted to also reiterate what Kim said about the patios on the special needs classrooms. That definitely came in handy and is something I know we all miss right now.
Okay. So I think there was a comment in one of the draft illustrations about patios, and I didn't quite get a feel for what that was. So you guys were in one facility and you've now moved to another temporary facility? Okay.
Yes.
And then the previous facility had patios and you don't have them now?
Yes, and it's a big safety issue.
Yeah.
So every special ed classroom had an enclosed patio area, and if you had a child who was in a meltdown, you could take them out there always with a staff member, and you just let them work through their meltdown. So they're not, it's not a danger to the other class, to the rest of the class, to the other students. And we don't have that now. We don't have an area for that. Also, classes used it sometimes for just a break for the whole class. They would go out there and, bounce a ball around, or they could have some trikes that they rode out around there. And we don't have that now. And so we do have runners in all of our special ed classrooms. And those kids, when you take them outside, they take off.
Right.
And, you don't always want to have to be holding their hand.
Right.
They need that freedom. And especially, our kids on the spectrum, when they're having a meltdown, they need to be able to get that out, and they need that safe area to do it.
Right. And we would use it as our PE space, and also like a quick recess break, and it was enclosed, so we didn't have to worry about them taking off. If paras are going on their breaks and we're short staffed, then it's a nice area to let the kids run, but it's small, it's safe, they're not going anywhere.
Okay. So I'll need to get with Maurice or maybe somebody else here in the district to give me a clearer picture of, you know, maybe an actual picture of what it looked like. You know, was it a screened in porch? Was it, you know, like how big was it? You know, how many of them were there? You know, that kind of thing, so that we can incorporate that into the plan. So
I don't know the size, but you just think of like a walled-in courtyard.
okay.
They had 6 to 8 foot. I don't know how tall the walls were. My son could climb over it, but he's 6.5 feet tall. So maybe 7 foot tall walls.
Yeah, I think they're 8.
Okay, and a concrete floor. And they were adjacent to the regular classroom. So you went out the door of a classroom, and then you had a 2 or 3 walls that closed it in, depending on where it was, next to the building. And I don't know the size, because I'm not good with measurements.
Right. Okay. All right. That gives me a lot of good information to go on. I appreciate that. So I want to be mindful of the time. We're getting close to 2 hours here, but I've done a lot of talking, and I appreciate you all being willing to participate. I know being on this call for 2 hours is a long time.
I'm going to mute everybody really quick.
Okay. But nonetheless, I appreciate you being here. Brandy, it took me a minute to get on board with you, but now I understand what you're saying. So thank you for that. I apologize for your frustration on that, but I hear you now. I got it. I got what you need. And I appreciate all of you sharing, especially with this last question. It's kind of fun to think like, okay, step back, big picture. What is it that I really want at the end of the day on this? I know we got into some real nitty gritty tonight, so I really appreciate you hanging in there with that. And if, you know, sometimes, you know, you'll go home, well, you're already home, but you'll go to bed tonight and you'll think like, oh, I forgot to say whatever it was. Email us anytime if something pops up, you know, if you have a burning question or desire. We know that we're running these labs a little differently than we typically might because of our current national situation. But anything else that happens to pop up in the next, you know, whenever, but especially in the next couple days, send that over to us. We want to make sure that we get that incorporated. So our next steps will be now to take everything that you've given us, the edits tonight to the compilation, the edits to the adjacencies, work those into some narratives, and send this back out to the district. We might have specific questions. We might do a one-off like, hey, check this area out. Let us know if this is what you were talking about, and then send it back to us kind of thing. But I think we you know, can send it through the district folks, and if they see something glaring that we need an answer on, we can send it back to you. So any other questions, concerns, thoughts before we dismiss for the evening?
And I'll be sending, as soon as we adjourn here, I will be sending all of you the presentation. So you can look through it on your own time, and if you have any more suggestions or anything like that, please send them back to us.
Well, I know it's been a long day for you all. I know I was a classroom teacher for almost 10 years myself, so I know what it's like. I don't know what it's like to teach virtually in 2020, but I know it's a long day, so I appreciate you hanging in there and being available for us. So enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you guys so much for everything you're doing for us.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Did you guys get the message about the PTO storage room?
I did. Oh yeah, I forgot to discuss that, but I did. It is noted, is what I'm trying to say.
At the old Richmond, they had a closet. I think, you know, 100 square foot space, if we could give them a little bit of space to store and operate out of, they've been great. So
okay.
I just wanted to give voice. I saw it in the comments, but I wanted to make sure we took care of her.
Okay. Yeah. That's my bad. Yeah, we will take that into account. I think we should have some extra spaces that we can probably do that with.
And then, do you know anything about the turf? Do you know, is there going to be a field? Is that, I saw it in like the pages 1 through 5, which we ended up not discussing so much today, really, on that document you sent us. You know what I'm talking about? It's like a 1 through 5.
The idea is that there would be some kind of a field for the kids to play in. You know, with the environment, we don't know what the surface is going to be, but some kind of an open field for them to play in.
There's currently a plan for that at the moment.
Yeah.
At least it's on the papers at the moment. So I just was, hopeful, because sometimes we'll take our kids out of wheelchairs and like put them on the grass and, like to get them outside. And then I'm assuming somewhere in there, we'll talk about adaptive playground equipment. That's probably much later, but.
That's actually already in a draft of the front end document, that I've been kind of writing in the background that, we're going to have 3 different playgrounds for the 3 different grade levels, but then also have all the adaptive equipment that's appropriate for the population.
That it would be the most exciting for me. That would be the most exciting because it's something we just don't have. We never have, and it's so expensive, right, to get put in. And so it's really the best time for inclusion. And a lot of times it doesn't happen. So thank you, because that speaks to my heart.
Yeah.
And we have looked at that. Like Brandy said, we have looked at purchasing it. I've been at Richmond 24 years. This is my 24th year. And pretty much every year we have looked at trying to buy some adaptive PE or adaptive playground equipment, and it's just so expensive. It just has never happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that if we write it into the spec, and especially since we have adaptive physical education, we can write it in such a way that it's almost an educational requirement.
Mm-hmm. So. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
You guys have a good evening.
Thank you.
You too. I'm going to actually end the meeting now. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye, everyone.